All right, let's talk about Trump and his comments with packing the Supreme Court, which Biden is now hinting at, making comments about, putting up, appointing an investigative committee to take a look at. So, I mean, this was interesting because Biden, when he was campaigning, I use that word very lightly, when he was campaigning, he did his best to dodge the question of whether he's going to pack the Supreme Court, and he was scripted to dodge that because I think everyone knew that if he was going to reveal the Democrats' plan, which is indeed to pack the Supreme Court, then well, he would have. How can I phrase this without getting banned on YouTube? They would have needed a lot more trucks at night. But anyway, Alexander, what do you make of Trump's statement here with the Supreme Court and packing?
Indeed. Well, I have to be also very careful what I'm going to say, but Trump has released a coruscating statement in which he has said that the Supreme Court across 2020 repeatedly dodged its responsibilities in all the litigation that we all know about that took place, and especially litigation that was brought by the states and indeed by the President of the United States himself. It dodged all that litigation. It refused to give a decision. It did so in part because it was terrified that it would expose itself to demands from the left and from the Democratic Party for packing. And all that appeasement has given it is a situation where it now has an administration which seems to be going ahead with projects to go ahead and to engage in packing, because that is, of course, what the Biden-Harris administration is going to do. Now, they're setting up this investigative committee. We can be absolutely sure that looking at the people who are involved, that they're going to say, well, we need to rebalance the Supreme Court, and that means appointing more liberal justices and to dilute the conservative majority. And to be very clear, that would be an absolute and complete disaster. It would confirm that, the Supreme Court can be reshaped by whichever president is in office. It doesn't matter whether there's any vacancies. That president, if he's got a majority in the Senate, could just pack the Supreme Court with political appointees who will do the president's bidding and the president's party's bidding, and that will weaken the Supreme Court, which is a keystone of the whole United States constitutional structure. You're absolutely right to say that this was floated during the election. Joe Biden gave everybody the impression he wouldn't do it, and now we see that it's actually being mooted about. The fascinating thing about the Biden administration is that, of course, Biden ran as a centrist, or at least gave people to think that he was a centrist. This moderate, a middle-of-the-road person. Remember his inaugural address when he said that, he was going to rise above partisanship and all of that. In reality, it is drifting ever further towards the radical positions, be it on the stimulus package, being on the infrastructure package, which we have deconstructed in one of our videos and pointed out that it's not really an infrastructure package at all. It's really a shopping list of what people on the left want to see. And now we see even the Supreme Court and constitutional change, the ending of the filibuster. Now they're looking at ideas for packing the Supreme Court as well. It's really remarkable to see how quickly this has happened, and how ill thought out and ill judged and ultimately dangerous this is, and how there is so far surprisingly little pushback against it, because the media is still, in effect, insulating the Biden administration from criticism. And it also shows that if the Supreme Court did indeed appease the Democrats over the course of 2020, well, appeasement doesn't work. And we could have told them as much.
Yeah, but I mean, this was baked into the cake with the Biden administration. I think obviously Biden. These aren't Biden's ideas. I mean, he could be a moderate, he could be a conservative, whatever he is. It's not really. I mean, he's being, he's being scripted. He's just the front man, if you could even call him that, for policy that's taking place behind the curtain. I mean, I think everyone recognizes that at this point. And, this was part of the plan all along. I believe, in my opinion, was to pack the Supreme Court and to dilute the power of the Supreme Court, because if you dilute the power of the Supreme Court, then that would mean more power to the central government, i.e. the Democrats if they're in power, or the Republicans. I think the Republicans, if they gain power, they also benefit from this. So why wouldn't McConnell, on the one hand, publicly say, oh, this is wrong, but on the other hand, kind of be sitting there with Schumer and Pelosi and, toasting to their success. I mean, I could see them in a back room sitting there, saying, this is great. We're just going to get more and more power between us. Whichever one is running the show in Congress, it's more power between us. Trump said, let me read you the title from Zero Hedge, because I kind of agree with this, even though this is terrible for America. It's a tragedy for America. The title from Zero Hedge reads, "They'll get what they deserve," and that's in quotes. Trump blasts pathetic, and pathetic is in quotes, Supremes as Biden court packing looms. And I agree with that. In a way, the Supreme Court also, and once again, I preface this by saying this is absolutely terrible for America. It's an absolute tragedy for the United States of America and for the justice system in the United States of America. But the Kavanaughs, the Amy Coney Barretts, the Roberts, Trump is right. They do kind of deserve this, don't they? Okay, standouts like Thomas and Alito, they're the ones that wanted to resolve the issues of November 3rd. Even though it had passed, even though Biden was going to be president, they still wanted to resolve those issues for the good of the country. Everyone else in the Supreme Court, they were kind of flippant about it, or they just basically hid. I mean, Kavanaugh just disappeared. Amy Coney Barrett disappeared. And that was that. So Trump is right in a way, isn't he?
Oh, I think he is, absolutely. Can I just say, I mean, you mentioned McConnell. I mean, one of the things is, again, the extent to which the Republican establishment's visceral hatred of Donald Trump blinds them to the realities of what is happening. Because, of course, you've got to understand that this idea about packing the Supreme Court is not just it's part of a jigsaw of policies. Firstly, you change the electoral system, and we know there's all sorts of ideas about that. You abolish the filibuster. You make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico into states. That way you give yourself, that's the plan. I don't say it's going to work, but that's the plan, an inbuilt Democrat majority. And then, of course, you change the Supreme Court. You pack the Supreme Court with your officials. So you can do whatever you basically want. And you can ram it through Congress. You can be fairly confident that you will continue to win elections. And the Supreme Court, instead of acting as a brake, will simply rubber stamp it, because you have a majority there too. That, it seems to me, is the agenda. Whether it's a practical agenda, whether it can work in practice, whether it will all work out as the people in the Democrat Party think it will, that's another question. But the McConnells ought to be alive to it. And they ought to have said to the American people, this is the great danger. If you press on with this, if you support the people who are, coming to power in this way, be very clear, they will do exactly what Senator Schumer said they would do. They will change the United States, or they will try to change the United States. They will alter its system of government. They will weaken its checks and balances. They will try to centralize power in themselves. And that's what we see happening. That's what all of these various constitutional moves that we see are ultimately intended to achieve. Now, will it work? That is another matter. But both McConnell, and by the way, Donald Trump, as well as criticising those Supreme Court justices, has also criticised McConnell again. The McConnells, on the one hand, and the people on the Supreme Court on the other, as I said, on the one hand, their feelings, their visceral feelings of Donald Trump, blind them to these realities. And on the other hand, they thought that if they appeased the Democrats, that, some of these things wouldn't happen. Well, they completely misjudged the single-mindedness of their enemy, if I can put it like that. And if they were able to get their obsession with Donald Trump off their minds and looked at the overall reality of what is happening, they would have understood it better. So Kavanaugh and Comey, Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and all those people, well, they've achieved their great desire to become Supreme Court justices. And they may find that that actually turns to dust and ashes, because, of course, if the Supreme Court is packed, then their position in the Supreme Court is marginalised, and they might have been better off staying as lower court judges, because there arguably they had more influence. So that's what appeasement gets you. It doesn't get you anything in the end. If the Supreme Court had acted like a Supreme Court, people might have rallied to it and say there is some point in defending it. But by appeasing their adversary, they misjudged their adversary and disappointed their own supporters, who might not be willing to come out and back them to the extent that they did.
Yeah, okay. Final question, though, is going off of what you said with McConnell. Okay, so the U.S. Supreme Court, Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts, sucks for them because their power is going to be diminished, right? Okay, so they thought they're going to have a lot of influence and a lot of sway, and as the Constitution dictates, they're going to be part of the one of the most. I think sometimes the Supreme Court is probably the most important branch of the U.S. government, but that's going to go away now because you're just going to pack the court. It's just going to be diluted, and over time it's going to be meaningless, the Supreme Court. But can you say that the jigsaw puzzle is more about one government, one party government, one party rule than anything else, and people like McConnell, who's, say, the as high as you can get in the opposing party, will easily make it to be part of this one party rule? Okay, maybe lower people, underlings, like, say, I don't know, people in the House like a Jim Jordan or Matt Gaetz or these guys, okay, they'll be purged, right? But people like McConnell or Liz Cheney, they'll easily be part of this one party government rule. So for them, I think on balance, this is a win. This jigsaw puzzle you say, if it does take shape, and we don't know if it'll succeed or not, but if it does take shape and succeed, you are going to have a one-party rule in the United States, and people like McConnell are not going to be left out of the party, are they? Other people may, but they're not.
Well, they won't be completely excluded from the room, but one shouldn't underestimate the extent to which they will lose influence. I mean, McConnell depends, for the status that he has and the sort of pivotal role that he has, on the fact that he leads in the Senate one of the great parties of the United States. If that party is marginalised, donors, for example, who are big backers of McConnell and who are ultimately about power, will say, well, what's the point of McConnell? I mean, I'm not interested in giving him funding anymore, and I'm not interested in giving the people that he supports funding, because ultimately he doesn't have any access to the real levers of power. So patronage and all that will pass out of his hands. And what is the point of him? And as for, people like McConnell and, Liz Cheney and Murkowski and Romney, going over to the other side. Well, even if they were prepared to do that, and some of them might, the fact is the Democrats will never trust them. And they too will say, well, we don't need these people anymore. What does Mitch McConnell and Murkowski and Romney and all the rest, what do they bring to us that has any value? From our point of view, we've got control. We are in control of all the levers, and we don't need McConnell and his like anymore. So maybe in his arrogance, or hubris, as we Greeks like to say, he thinks that, if things turn out like they appear to be going, he'll be all right. But in reality, I don't think they will be. It's the kind of miscalculation that politicians who spend all their time engaging in backstairs dealing and that sort of thing, and who lose touch with the real life of the country, that's the kind of situation they eventually find themselves in, because they lose ultimately that connection with the people, which is the source of their power. And I think that's where McConnell and co are heading, onto the dustbin of history, not into the centre of power. So they may say to themselves, we'll be all right. It'll be the Jordans and the Nunes and people like this who will be isolated and thrown under the bus. We'll be all right. But I think what they will find is that they won't be.
Yeah, but looking in a historical context, as a country undergoes this massive shift, and these forces say they succeed to an extent with putting all the pieces in place so that they never lose another election, right? They make it work somehow. They get all these things past Supreme Court, D.C. statehood, Puerto Rico statehood, abolish electoral college, all these things. Say they get all this stuff done, filibuster all of it. You essentially have a one-party rule. And looking from a historical perspective, you also have right now taking place the fusion of corporate structures of the government as well. I mean, you have that taking place as well. So you don't really you don't need the donors anymore. You don't need the two-party system. All of that just kind of fades away, and you have this evolution to like I say, this type of one-party Politburo type of ruling class in a way. I mean, that would be the evolution if they get all this stuff that they want done. And we start with the Supreme Court, we start with the Electoral College, we do the filibuster, we do the statehood. If all that is done, then there's no doubt you have a one-party rule. And I'm just trying to think, there are going to be people who are going to be part of that Politburo. And there are going to be people that you said are just going to, like you said, are just going to be purged. And I'm just trying to I'm trying to think of it from a historical standpoint. This is possible. And if you go, if you take a look at this jigsaw puzzle that you said, if this jigsaw puzzle gets pieced together, that is what you have. There's no doubt about that. We shouldn't be mistaken about that.
Absolutely, yeah, that's entirely right. I mean, that is certainly the agenda that some people want, and it's the agenda which is, however incoherently and chaotically, is being followed. I mean, it's been really remarkable, as I said, how rapidly and quickly after the election the Biden-Harris administration has run with it. I mean, it's only a few months ago, when, since Biden was, projecting himself as this bipartisan, moderate centrist figure, and we see how completely, untrue that has turned out to be. But if all this happens, if all the pieces of the jigsaw are put in place, and you mentioned also the Electoral College, which I didn't mention, but critically you also mentioned the fusion between political, corporate and institutional power, which is also taking place, and which is all part of it. We'll be very clear. I mean, what was it James Madison said? We're giving you a republic if you can keep it. Well, it will be no longer a republic because you will have lost it. I mean, certain of the forms will be there. There will still be a president. There will still be Congress. There will still be a Supreme Court. There will still be elections. But none of them will have the same meaning that they did previously. They will all function in a way that is radically different. And the United States will be a profoundly different country from the one which it was. I mean, Schumer, maybe he doesn't, indeed, even himself doesn't understand the full implications of this. But he said that they would change America, and they will. I mean, it will be completely different country. The way it will be run will be completely different from the way it has been run up to now. I will predict, by the way, that such a structure would be an extremely unstable one, which, I mean, it would lose the United States that critical quality of legitimacy and stability, which has been the foundation, the true foundation of American wealth and American power. But that's a problem, if you like, for the future. The immediate consequence of all of this is, as I said, that it will be a completely different United States. In fact, it won't be the United States of America. It will be something different entirely. I mean, it may retain the same name, but it would not be the United States that we know.
All right. We'll leave it there, guys. I'll drop a discount to the Duran shop down below in the description box. Take care.